All right, so what's up, everybody? Thank you for watching this interview. We're here with Larkin Seiple. It's awesome. Larkin, if you want to introduce yourself and talk about maybe a little bit of your early experience.
Yeah, my name's Larkin. I'm a DP living in Los Angeles, and I got into film, I think the same way most people did, where you're graduating high school and you're not really attracted to all the professions, but you happen to like movies. So you're like, why not? Let's see if I can make a career out of that. And then I ended up going to a small art school in Boston called Emerson. I'm not sure how much it's on the radar still or whatnot, but they ended up having a pretty kind of funky program. Like the school itself wasn't an amazing film school, if it makes sense. I'm not sure what an amazing film school is, but kind of like most film schools, you were kind of forced to work on other students' projects. So I ended up spending every weekend on set, and then I jumped on the feature as an electrician freshman year and spent nights in the woods pulling cable and running banded and then going to school during the day, which didn't do well for my grades. But I got really into the electrical side of everything and started gaffing projects and doing that. And I think I spent the first 3 years just gaffing and trying to shoot on the side. And by the time I left, I think all of my friends were in the union in Boston, and then they all moved out to LA. So I was like, this is great. I'll just move out to LA and work as an electrician, which kind of wasn't planning on doing, but it worked out great because if you want to be a DP, the best way to learn is to be on set and figure out why the DP's calling for these lights, why these gels, why we're placing them here, and the type of crazy ideas they're kind of coming up with. This is back before LEDs were really popular. So the soft light gag back then was to take a bunch of Christmas lights and just shove them through styrofoam. And you'd have like a spark or a juicer just kind of running around, filling in actors. Yeah, that was it. I was also studying on film when I went to school, which kind of held back your form of production, if you will. Like everyone had to save up and get a 16 mil camera, and everyone bitch and moan because the school didn't have good 16 mil cameras. We had like SR2s, and most kids got to use a Bolex. Mm-hmm. But I ended up being on set a lot, which I think kind of helped determine my direction, because I think everyone goes to school wanting to be a director usually. It's different now, I think, because of the accessibility of phones and digital cameras. Like from the very beginning, like people can be a DP from the start. But when I went, I think everyone wanted to either write or direct, and the craft side of it wasn't as popular. And then I think after being on set as an electrician for like a year, I was like, if I DP, I can probably be a part of 8 to 10 projects a year. Whereas if I direct, I'll do like 1 project a year. Mm-hmm. And that kind of pushed me down that road because I just kind of wanted to tell stories and be a part of that. Like the making things look cool and fancy lighting was a nice part of it, but I was just like aching to just have stories to tell and stories to share. Because I think everyone, no matter what you are on set, has a directing bone in your body. Yeah. You all want to, you're there, you're proud of it. You're not just like, wow, the light's cool. Like if the movie sucks, you're not going to show it to anyone.
Yeah.
So it was a journey, but yeah, Emerson ended up kind of kicking you out to LA your senior year to figure out if you liked it or not. So I spent a semester working at a camera house and realized that cameras are not for me. A little too technical, and a lot more focus. But it was good because I got to learn all the film cameras. And then the very next year, I think film cameras died. That was like when the HVX came out. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that camera. Yeah. That was back when like HVX was the big thing, and then adapters are coming out for cameras. So you could put like a 35 mil lens on like a crappy $5,000 camera and you get depth of field.
Yeah.
So that was
things.
Yeah. The Luce adapter, the Sigma one, there's all sorts of them. I think they still exist, but that was my transition point. I got there, I had learned on film, I did edit film, and then the whole market flipped to digital, which was fine because, I was able to buy like an HVX and like a Luce adapter and shoot small projects on the side. But then I spent a while being an electrician on sets and jumping on movies for like $100 a day, non-union stuff, like all over the map, doing Iranian hip hop music videos on the side and like other smaller projects. And then eventually there was a writer's strike, and I was 29 days. I had was 29 days of, I had 29 union days. To get into the union, you need 30. And in LA, there's a catch-22 to the union, is the only way to get into the union is to have 30 union days. So how do you get hired if you're not in the union? Like, how do you get your days?
Yeah.
And that's to be on movies that flip. So you jump on like a low budget movie, and then halfway through it, the union will come in and say, oh, you guys have enough money to be union. Everyone on here is now union. So you start accruing those days. And so I was almost electrician, like a 728 electrician. And then the writer's strike happened and movies just stopped for like 6 months. So then I jumped into reality TV, which is a very different form of entertainment. But I basically ended up doing documentaries kind of all over the world and lighting interviews and kind of figuring out naturalism versus realism. I mean, it wasn't classy stuff. We were following like weird parades or like travel writer shows, or just kind of just weird, funky stuff. But it was a nice way to kind of get out and see some things and try to figure out how to light anyone, anywhere, in any room. And then at that point, I was starting to shoot music videos on the side of like budgets for like $5,000, which and then slowly I was doing like a music video every month, and I was taking less and less reality jobs. And then it got to a point that I was getting like a music video every 2 weeks. And so I had to like make this decision about whether or not to stick with these reality jobs and these occasional electric jobs, or just commit to being a DP, in fear that if I took like a reality job, I would miss a music video or something. Mm-hmm. And so I eventually just pulled the trigger and used up all my savings and went broke. But after a year of just shooting music videos and like smaller commercials and industrials and you name it, I was able to like pay my bills and like survive on my own. And then just be a DP and no longer do stuff on the side. Yeah, and so from there I just did music videos until I got into movies.
That's awesome.
And commercials. Commercials ultimately is what took over. I mean, music videos are fun, but you can't really make a living on music videos. And if you do, it means you're probably not going to leave music videos. Mm-hmm. Like if you're like, 35 or 40 and you're still in music videos, there's probably a reason. It's like you've been trying to make money off of them and not actually make good music videos, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Because like the budgets are so low now that usually me, the director and the producer, we go into it and we believe in it. And by the end of it, we've all thrown our rate in. We've all put a little more of our own money into it. We've all asked a bunch of favors. And then hopefully you get a good music video out of it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
When you were coming up, were there sort of like a group that you kind of got together with that like you came up together and those relationships kind of held to this day? Or
yeah, I mean, in college I luckily had a good floor of folks. We called ourselves Floor 9 Productions. So a terrible name. None of us were no one was really a director in my group, though. We were all like electricians, and then we were all some of us were editors, some of us were DPs. We all kind of worked on the same projects. And I think by senior year, like almost half of them were just like, I'm no longer working on sets anymore. I'm like out of it. I can't murder all my weekends for this. But they all moved out to LA. One of them is now like a head story writer for an animation show. One of them did sound and reality. A couple of the other guys like moved out to LA and didn't click for them, so they moved back to Boston. One of them now works in the music record label. But I think the craziest part of the college experience is that I think a teacher quoted this. He said, "You will meet 10 people that will determine the rest of your career." And I believe that is a fact. Like that is 100% the case. Like where I am now is all because of this one producer who wasn't a producer in college. He was just like a friend who recommended me for like a project and like introduced me to Hiro inadvertently, or like the Daniels who I work with now. I didn't know them that well, but Tall Daniel or Daniel Shiner was in my friend's comedy troupe. And so we kind of knew each other, but then not really. So when we met out in LA, I had that one connection. And I was like, oh, we should work together. We should do something. Like it's all very surreal, but all kind of, you don't think may not be apparent in college, but then like down the road, it's like, oh, I know this person. I'll reach out. And that's kind of how a lot of it's worked out for me, is I just ended up knowing people randomly. Like I don't really work with any of my good friends from college. It was all just people on the side or in the periphery. So don't make any enemies.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't know if you want to talk about some of those like earlier, but I guess a little bit later on music videos, like the Arcade Fire, like Earl Sweatshirt. I remember that Earl Sweatshirt video like rocked my world.
We've done a couple of them.
Chum one.
The Chum one. Okay, yeah. I get so confused. I've done 3 Earl Sweatshirt videos now that everything's blending together. Chum we shot in front of a 99-cent store at night. I think that was Earl's first music video for himself. Me and Hiro both loved the track. I'm trying to remember what the idea behind it was. It was very low budget. And we opted for black and white to kind of make the most of the location without having it be this, like, you can't really tell it's 99-cent store, which is colors are like white and green and purple. So we were like, let's go black and white and see what we can do. And Hiro had all these beautiful references and these abstract pieces. We shot in one night. I think Earl had pneumonia, which wasn't good. And he had to go to the hospital when we finished. And the first shot we did with him is we rigged him upside down. And I think his sinuses just flooded and he was like, cut, we're out. And we're like, oh shit, is he gonna bail from the video? But he was a good sport and we just kept shooting. It's been so long since I've seen that video. I'm just gonna take a peek at it real quick. Yeah, there wasn't nothing crazy to it. We kind of spent most of our time working on the circular light rig that kind of moves around him.
Oh yeah.
That was something we built before we had automated lighting. So don't think it was an LED chase. It was just like a bunch of bulbs like wired together in like a circle. Mm-hmm. And then kind of like of all of Hiro's music videos, we shot the main concept. And then as we're editing it, we're like, oh, we need some more like kind of moments of that are a little more surreal. So we spent a couple nights driving around. There's like a great shot of like a house floating in darkness that's lit by car headlights. Yeah. And that was just this beautiful, like funky house we shot in Echo Park. And then he showed me the comp later and I was like, that's like my favorite shot of the video. And that was something we just kind of like grabbed as we went along. But that's all. I mean, as much as I want to talk about that video, it's all Hiro. I this one is very much like him just kind of vibing the song and slowly putting together the pieces.
You mentioned the references. What were some of the specific ones that Hiro really was into for the track?
Let me see if I can find the treatment for it. Let me, 1 second.
Oh, you're good.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you're going to cut down this thing or people are just going to stare at me looking for. Huh. Apparently it's not in my email. Let me just do a deep dive. Huh. All right, well, no dice on that treatment. It's funny because Hiro keeps all the treatments for everything he's done.
Yeah.
And they're great. They're really beautiful. They're very sparse. Let me see if I can just find it on here 1 second. There's the track and there's the cut, but there's no treatment. Shit. Oh, I didn't even realize this. I got the same track from another music video director also pitching on Chum. That's funny. That's what was kind of nice about when I got into it. There was like a new wave of music video directors kind of coming out at that time, like Daniels and Hiro, A.G. Rojas, all these awesome directors, and they're all kind of doing very different things. Yeah. You know, Daniels are just making the most absurd music video they can, and Hiro's trying to find these more like dialed back, minimalist, like expressionist videos. Mm-hmm. But everyone was riding on the same track. I remember like when Foster the People made Pumped Up Kicks, I think I knew 20 directors working on that same track. Everyone was like jazzed about it. Everyone was writing on it. And it was kind of weird. Like the whole music video community would meet like every Christmas and go to like a big party. And they'd be like, which is great. Like as a DP, you're like at a party and there's like 15 amazing directors and you're like, oh, I should go talk to them, or I loved your work, or like whatever. But
Yeah.
you know, it felt like prom in like a weird way of like everyone showing up. Because you never get everyone in the same room, especially like DPs never meet other DPs. That never happens. It's like ships in the night. But yeah, no dice on the Earl one. I could watch the video again and probably pinpoint it, but he had a couple of references, but generally he just sends, you know, some interesting gifts, or he just a lot of the times he's just writing down stuff that's popping into his mind, or he'll actually pull a lot of like anime references, which is always a really kind of fun way to translate something that's not already been made, but something that's simply just been drawn. I mean, he's also like, I'm not sure if you've seen Hiro's work, but he's himself is like an amazing illustrator.
Yeah. Was this, how long had you and Hiro been collaborating together at this point?
We've been trying to collaborate for a while. I was kind of hounding after him a little bit because he made some, like his first music video was mind blowing. I'm trying to figure what it was. It was just like music video in a warehouse. Again, very expressionistic imagery, singular camera, single lights, just beautiful work. And I kept trying to work with him. And the first job we ever worked on was a commercial for Juicy Fruit with a puppet zebra or something. And it was totally not anything me and Hiro would ever do together, but it was like a hard comedy with like cheesy lighting and a puppet. And that's the first thing we worked on together. And luckily that didn't sway him. And then I think we made Chum. Chum may have been our first music video. I should text him. Yeah, I didn't realize we were going down so deep down the rabbit hole. I feel very out of touch with my earlier career.
No, that's cool. Yeah, I guess I was also wondering too, like some of your early philosophies with like, you know, you talked about how you guys did that commercial that like neither of you were super into. What was sort of like your philosophy with approaching music videos, like in a theory perspective?
Well, it's a little tricky. So when I first started doing music videos, you kind of take any music video you can get your hands on. And when I first started shooting them, it was a lot of like poppy videos and dance numbers. And unlike now where you have like these beautiful minimalist dance numbers and gorgeous spaces, you know, where people are dancing with like a ladder or something really abstract and unique. I was like very much still people trying to like grab on to like the late 90s of like, let's make like a bang and dance video on a budget. So it's like get a bunch of dancers and color lights and some crazy strobes and go for it. And I was doing a lot of pop videos and it was a little depressing because it was fun to work and shoot, but I wasn't doing anything I like shooting. Mm-hmm. And then I started working with David Altabelli, who's another director that I did a lot of work with and kind of cut my teeth with in a way. Like I've worked with Hiro a lot, but I did a ton with David. And David would have these really beautiful ideas and we'd have like $2,000 and we'd get a camera and a couple friends and go out to the desert or just take a road trip somewhere and kind of make some of my favorite work. That was back with the old Red MX cameras, if you can remember those.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, that was, you kind of take everything you can and then eventually you get to a point where you can say no and not just do some heavy metal video or some cheesy pop video, and you can just focus on music videos more as like a portfolio of what you like as work. The nice thing is people can't really track what you've done with music videos necessarily. So you could go and if you had to pay bills, you could go and shoot like a pop video or like a cheesy hip hop video, like on a white psych. Mm-hmm. But eventually I started taking on videos that like once I got to a point where I could say no, I was like, all right, I generally don't want to do one-day shoots because I think it's really hard to do a good music video in one day unless the concept is based around that. Like if it's a oneer, you should be able to do it in one day. So usually I push for 2-day shoots. And also I just kind of push for shoots that understood what making a music video was, which is doing more minimalism as opposed to like huge setups, because unless you have a lot of money, you're just going to waste your time trying to make one huge setup and then you're going to race around at the end of the day trying to collect the rest of the pieces. So I was doing some bigger pop videos at the time too. I did a bunch of Rihanna videos and Katy Perry videos, and those would have like 3 or 4 days, and you could do anything. You could chase stallions, light people on fire, you name it. But in general, like the good videos, you had to be really careful about and kind of select. And usually you saved up and you put your own money in, you gave your rate, you would finagle with producers to make sure that your crews actually got paid better too, because then you could actually get good crew, like someone who knew, like my gaffer Matt, who can actually do anything you want with like LED lighting and program it, like that type of ability to control lighting from a distance and make it like programmable to a beat was like incredibly like it's kind of what defined a lot of the earlier videos. Even like Chum, like trying to figure out that lighting rig. It was like a collaboration between me and technicians. It wasn't like me in my garage building this device. It was me kind of stipulating what we need to do and how is the best way to do it and what's the best tool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's it. I mean, just pick good ones.
Have there been any experiences specifically with directors who kind of lean towards those kind of videos you weren't into as much that you started saying no to?
Do I have experience turning down people, or?
Yeah, especially like I guess directors that perhaps maybe they're doing a pop video, but you want to work with them in a narrative sense later on. Would you still say yes to those people? Or?
I mean, generally it's, you only say, I mean, everyone's like in a different boat. It kind of depends on what you want to do. I kind of did every music video under the sun for a while. Again, I've done some very cheesy pop videos, which can also be really fun because then you get to work on pop lighting, which then will help you out later when you're doing a commercial and you need to backlight a psych and have a whole color wash and define like a system of changes that you can pop on and off in a limited amount of time. I mean, even me and Hiro did like a big pop video for a makeup company that was just motion control. That was very much not what we normally do. It kind of like figure out what you want to get out of the project. So if you want to make a better connection, then yeah, if a director on a project, that's not my vibe, but I really like the director. I'm not sure if it's the director's vibe, or if the director is just trying to get paid, or what's happening. But generally, you think you can feel it. It's usually a gut reaction in the end. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't done that too much. Now I kind of, in the state that I'm in, I do hopefully 1 or 2 movies a year. It's funny, I don't do music videos anymore. Hopefully I do like 1 or 2 music videos a year. And then the rest of the time I'm doing commercials, mainly in Los Angeles, just trying to make enough money that I can go and do an indie for 3 months and lose all my savings making the indie, and then come back and do commercials and try to build back up so I can go do another indie.
Do you find like at this point in your career now that music videos are like a big sandbox to kind of play in?
It's tricky because good music generally doesn't have a budget, like the music that I'm attracted to. Like there's enough money to get in trouble, but it's just kind of getting creative. Like I forget, what was the music video I did? Gotta look up Hiro's work. An example of like a very low budget music video me and Hiro did was, there's just so many. I just gotta scroll through his website now to find it. We did a music video for Chet Faker's Gold, which is a bunch of girls roller skating at night on an abandoned road. That had a pretty small budget. And so we kind of just were like, can we pull this off? What can we do? And it's like, well, we'll make it free. We'll make it night, so we don't have to worry about continuity, and we can close down the road. We put all of our rate to getting like a truck with a jib on it, and then we lit it with just one light. And that video became really entertaining because it's like a new way to see choreography that you're not used to, but also done in like a very simple manner. Where's that one I was looking for? Go ahead. Deep down this hole. I don't have it on the website anymore. Never mind. We did a music video. I can't believe I'm blanking on the name of the artist, but basically we just flew to Detroit with one camera, me, the producer, and then we went and, I wouldn't say broke into, but we explored all these abandoned buildings and all these abandoned places. And then we got these beautiful, beautiful images of all these places at night and during the day, old closed down factories, churches, movie theaters, you have it. And then we came back to LA and he just did some visual effects to weave things through it, like a snake crawling through the rafters. And then we shot an artist on green screen at night. And I think that had a budget of like $10,000 or something, but it was about taking, you know, a very small budget and then trying to explore what's the biggest thing you could do with it and what's the most unique thing. And all you need in the end is just a camera and a director. It's not comfortable. You have to, you know, pull your own focus and lug gear around. But I think I did that for about 5 years. I remember the thing I was most excited about was not having to bring a camera package into my apartment because I lived like 3 stories up. So I had to bring in like 8 to 10 cases every night, put them in my room, then bring them back down to the car every morning. Oh, yeah. I also used to have to rent my own grip truck. So I'd go to like U-Haul or whatever, rent a 14-foot truck, bring that to a grip house, load it with, I had to put the shelving into it and then put all the gear on it. So my weekend was like doing small budget stuff. You do everything. You check out the camera, you return the camera, you pick up the grip gear, you return the grip gear. Like you did all of it. And I was so excited not to like do a music video and not have to spend 2 days prepping it and then 2 days returning everything.
Yeah.
But that's what you kind of got to do at the start of it. So no one else is going to go and pick up a grip truck and do it. That's how you kind of save money. Is you do everything, you'll actually have money you can afford more lights or a better camera. It's very painful.
Cool. And then I guess how did you sort of navigate a bit of the change from music videos into features?
Well, the music videos ultimately went into commercials. And so I was shooting like little fashion videos on the side with my friend's directing group called Skinny. We were shooting these little things on the 5D, and then kind of Skinny booked a big fashion commercial, just beautiful women in different places. I forget what it was about. But I shot this like 5-day fashion film, and then they booked another one, and I was like, oh, I can do that. And that was right around the time that I got an agent, because I had also done a music video with Nabil for Bon Iver's Holocene, which we shot in Iceland. Again, a director, a DP, and a bird guide, just driving around Iceland, shooting everything with our own camera package. 3 people to make that one video. And then once I got the agent, I was like, great, I can start doing more and more commercials. And then eventually I did a commercial with just a director named John Watts, who directed Cop Car.
Okay.
And that was my first movie, I want to say, which I didn't even shoot the whole thing. I co-shot it with another DP named Matt Lloyd, because Matt Lloyd had to go and shoot Daredevil, so I came in and shot the second half of it. But that was my first movie, and I kind of got that break because I knew the producer Cody and the director John from a commercial, which is a very weird way to get onto a feature.
Yeah. Very cool. I don't know. Are you down to talk about Swiss Army Man?
Yeah, I'll even fill in the gaps. There's another weird thing that came out of it was I did a music video of Daniels called Turn Down for What, which is like a DJ Snake song. It's a very stupid video about a guy who can't stop humping. And somehow that video got me a boxing film. I have no idea how that link works, but I did a boxing movie after that. So I was able to say I had two features under my belt. I can go and do smaller projects. And then luckily Daniels had Swiss Army Man, which was their labor of love and probably the weirdest movie I've worked on and probably will ever work on. Yeah, that was like a small little indie. It was produced by it was funded by 3 different people. So we had $3 million, which sounds like a lot for an independent film, but we shot it in 3 different cities in 23 days. No, 21 days? I forget. 23. So even though it was bigger, I think of like scrappy indies like $500,000 or like $1 million, which Cop Car was. I think Cop Car was very scrappy. We in order to make that film, I think, successful, we spent a month scouting for it. So we would just do road trips up the coast and back, and we realized that we would have no time to shoot because there's wire work and phantom work and people bursting out of the water, and there's a bear fight, and there's a man jet skiing on a floating corpse. Like, we had to kind of put all the money in front of the camera. So we decided to find locations that were gorgeous and then cancel all the lighting. which is one way to go about making a film, is to just kind of put your money in locations and then say, we're just going to hope for good weather. And that's kind of what happens. We shot for 2 weeks outside of San Francisco in this beautiful forest where we built that weird, funky bus. And that scene actually looks really weird because we lost light, and that was the one location we actually had lights on. So the whole thing's backlit by an HMI as we're kind of scrambling to get it all shot before everything goes dark. And then we spent 2 weeks in LA shooting all the hard stuff, like all the cave work, which is actually the cave from the old Batman TV show where the car shoots out. It's in the middle of Griffith Park near the observatory. And then we shot all the water work. We only had one day to shoot the whole jet ski sequence, which barely worked. It was just they made an inflatable Manny that was pulled by a boat. So it was like someone was tubing. Mm-hmm. And then we had a guy in a wig doing it. If you could actually watch the movie, we ran out of light there as well. And we had to spend I think half a day in the color grade trying to make all this beautiful sunset just look like day, kind of remove all the prettiness of it and just make it look boring. And then the final week we spent in Humboldt County with an incredibly small crew. I think there was a gaffer and a grip, but there was no lights and no grip gear. So I'm not sure what they were doing up there. Just kind of running around, and we were shooting in this beautiful forest called the Avenue of the Giants, which is where all those massive trees were, like all those epic spectacles are. But yeah, I mean, the production was hard and we had a good time making it, but yeah, I can answer any questions about it. I'm always not sure what to talk about when people bring up Swissy besides how different it is.
Yeah, I don't know if you wanted to talk about just some of the pre-production and planning that went into the visual language for the really surrealist stuff, like some of the stuff with the bus and some of the more fantastical elements versus the stuff that's more grounded in realism, when they're coming out of the forest at the end, things like that. How did you guys go about developing your visual language for that?
Kind of funny because working with directing duos as a DP is a bit challenging because normally you're working with a single director and you as a DP kind of become the other collaborator. You and the director are going over shot lists and you're figuring things out and your suggestions are much more potent. When you work with two directors, they've already done the shot list. They've already kind of talked about the scene. They've already thought about the visual language of it. So when you come in there as a cinematographer, you have an opinion and they listen and it's helpful, but it's not the same. It's less yours. You feel, I feel like I'm serving them a little bit more as opposed to collaborating. And my job with them has kind of been try to make the dumbest shit they can think of look normal or look compelling. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the work that we did was kind of figuring out the costumes, what was going to cut contrast well against green. Blue and red were kind of nice, so you have this nice RGB cycle. And then trying to figure out how to visually break it up because it's just two people in the woods. So it starts off very slow. And I think there's, static shots and very little movement. And then slowly as it progresses, it gets a little more dramatic and we start going handheld and all of we also kind of wanted it to, there's a lot of imagination in it. So we're kind of looking at early Spielberg stuff for all the weird flashbacks and all the night work. Because all the day was just kind of natural light with a little bit of fill. But as we got into the movie theater scene and any kind of fantasy with Sarah, mm-hmm. who's Paul Dano in drag, we kind of went for a lot warmer lighting. And we started kind of really, did you ever see Hook? The Spielberg film that was in the back of my mind the whole time while making it, was this almost boyish wonder to these very surreal scenes, mm-hmm. and kind of playing around with how much is supposed to be natural versus how much can we just light it and say that's just how it is. Mm-hmm. My memory is still pretty foggy from it because it's making it. I want to say we had a very clear idea of what we were doing, but it was pretty fast and furious. Most of the days we spent shooting the bigger scenes, and then all the really fun stuff, the movie theater scenes, all the flashbacks were shot in an hour at night. We would just rush through them because there's no dialogue in them. So on page, it's it's a quarter of a page, but it's the most technical and elaborate thing to do. that day. So we have to like chug through it and fight to make it. We also had no overtime on an indie film. You don't really get that luxury.
Yeah.
So you had to just kind of make it work.
Yeah.
Mhm. Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, the montage sequence kind of in the middle of the movie where Manny's kind of describing his emotions? That seemed to me at least pretty thought out. So when you came in, was it kind of storyboarded already a little bit by the Daniels, or were they just very visual people?
No, McDaniels are really big on transitions. They're really creative. They like to have one idea fold into another. And that whole part had been worked out. A lot of the transitions had already been worked out in advance. Like the montagey stuff and the fun stuff, we all had a very clear idea. It's more the challenging scenes are the scenes where, you know, you have Paul Dano trying on drag for the first time and Manny watching and trying to create the idea that this is totally fine and functional. Or the bus sequence was actually, you know, a little tricky to do because you have to make, you know, our mission was to make people feel like they were actually on a bus in traffic. Meanwhile, we're in the woods in like a garbage made bus skeleton. And I think I'm trying to remember. I mean, a lot of it is they were also rewriting the shot list every night and rewriting the script every night because it was one of those movies where you're constantly chasing a goal. And as we were making it, they were trying to like hone in on what each scene was about, which is great because you'd get new pages the next day and it'd be more focused and more defined. And at the same time, you'd be like, okay, so there's a whole new scene and we have to figure out how we can block this in before we lose the light. We were shooting in kind of a canyon in just outside San Francisco. So we would lose light every day around 3 p.m. So you have to figure out what scenes are going to have hard light and what scenes you can do with just ambient light. But in terms of, I've like a lot of other movies, we've done a lot more thorough shot listing, but with the Daniels, there's a little bit more chaos involved in kind of just going with the flow and vibing it. I just finished another movie with the Daniels a month ago. We didn't finish it. We got shut down with one day left in Los Angeles. And that movie was very different in that most of the scenes were thought out and there's a million transitions and it's very technical and wire work and visual effects and huge fight sequences. And it's kind of bananas. And it was really fun just to go from Swissy, which was really intense, to a film where it was very calculated and they had a very clear design. But like all things, even though it was very well designed, it'd be like, here's 50 shots, let's do it in one day. And you're like, oh dear God, you're just scrambling through it just to make it. Even though it's still, again, dialed in and there's a shot list, and there's a very clear idea of how to execute it. They're still always kind of reaching for the stars, no matter what the budget or what the time allotment is.
You said
still didn't quite answer your question, but
you said that you had like a lot of fun working on it. Do you think that like that sense of camaraderie and like just scraping everything together sort of like came across in the final product, or like helped you, you know, find new things while you're making it?
Yeah, I mean, the Daniels kind of, when they make a movie, they generally want to also make an experience, not just for the actors, but for the crew as well. Like they know, you know, it's an indie movie, no one's getting paid great, and you're not working crazy hours, but it's hard to work in a forest. Everyone got poison ivy. It was brutal. And but every day they'd start with a warm up, and they would get the whole crew together, and we'd all do some stupid exercise or some chant or something. And it was very silly, but you would kind of bond. And the producer created awards called the Producer's Outstanding Overachieving Person, which if you spell it out is a poop award. And so everyone would get a random gift from like a CVS that the producer went to the night before to like commemorate their hard work. And so every day they'd single out like a crew member for whether it was, you know, the person booming like in the middle of mud, or was it the art department guy that was going through and individually painting each piece of toilet paper that was floating through the air. It was a very fun shoot, and it felt very much like a family. And I've done other movies where they're fine, but that sense of camaraderie is not remotely apparent. It's very much a job, and people just want to get it done. And you lose something that way. People don't fight to make something as good, or they just kind of are waiting to go home, or they could be laying brick for all I know. Like it just feels like a job. They just happen to be there. But I think you get something a bit more special out of it because all the technicians are working a bit harder. You know, like instead of waiting to go to lunch, people are like, well, what if we did this over there? Or like you have other departments suggesting ideas to other departments, like a grip suggesting, you know, if you rig it this way, you'll be able to use both sides of it. Or, you know, sometimes, you know, the on-set photographer would be like, you know, over here, I can actually see the sunset. You'd be like, what? Let's just go over there. We'll shoot that scene that way. That's great. Thank you so much. Like you're making the scene. Everyone kind of wants to make what you're working on worth it when you work on projects that size and with directors that kind of care about the overall experience and understand that there's a humanity behind it. There's like some great quote that says like, if you're going to make a movie, make sure it's good because people are going to get divorced. People are going to like have marriages fall apart. People are going to not see their children. And people are going to lose money because of your fantastic idea. So whatever you do, make it worth something. And I've been on projects where it's like, this is not good. I don't know why we're here. I think about that quote, but.
So yeah, I figure we'd shift to talk about Luce a little bit, if you want. I guess first question, what were some of the biggest differences between something like Swiss Army Men and then Luce?
Luce was shot in New York, which is a very different vibe than California. I lucked out. It was like Luce was a $5 million project, but kind of like Swissy, like New York's so crazy that, you know, some of our electricians weren't even 21 on it. And I was just like, how are you on this movie? Not that you're a bad person, but I was like, you're learning right now, which is fine. It's a great place to learn, but it was just kind of surreal to go to New York and work with these big union crews and then find out that half your crew is just there learning with you. Which worked out great because, you know, those people that age tend to work a little bit harder and have a lot more interest in what we're doing. So we ended up having a great experience doing it. But when making Luce, we shot on 35 anamorphic. So you're moving a lot slower because you're trying to think about what your lighting situation is mainly. Generally with film, it's far less, it's not as sensitive as digital. And so we ended up having to really think about when we shot things and where we shot things. We were also shooting on anamorphic lenses that were slower. So if you can imagine shooting at ISO 2000 on digital, shooting at a 1.3, that's a lot of light. But if you lose 2 stops going to a 2.8, and then you lose 2 more stops going to a 500 ISO, that's 4 stops of light. So all of a sudden, like, you know, you can't really shoot scenes at dusk in the house, and you can't use dawn coming through the window to shoot the bedroom scene. You have to do a lot more lighting. The naturalism that we had in Swissy that we kind of embraced and leaned into was we kind of leaned away. I remember Julius, the director on Luce, said, I don't want this to be a moody indie. I had all these beautiful references to. I was like, oh, I have this, you know, we're going to make it moody and dark and the characters are going to come out of shadows. And he was like, I don't want that. And I was like, why? And his pitch was that he wanted the audience to feel comfortable and he didn't want the visuals to lean into like this kind of like darkness that was brewing into the surface. And so as you watch the film, everyone's like kind of classically lit. Not like there's backlight and huge keys, but, you know, we had a much thicker negative. We really exposed for it. And I think everyone was at least a stopover the whole shoot. And as things start deteriorating, we start removing highlights from people and doing subtle tricks to kind of be like, oh, something's going on, or this character feels like they're kind of falling down, or they're kind of descending into this hole. But overall, like, you know, I think Swissy is Steadicam and dolly and handheld and messy, and Luce, it's all rigid, it's all locked off. I think one of the reasons that I ended up working on it was that me and Julius really bonded over our love of Michael Haneke films like Cachet and Code Unknown, and all these kind of slower movies where you let the actors in the story do the blocking for you, and you're not trying to spice it up so much with the cinematography. And that became really fun in that you have a very restrained film, and then you have select moments where you kind of let the camera loose. Like there's one of the characters has a huge breakdown in the middle of it, and we did this wrapping 360 shot that was very much kind of not how we've been telling the story, but we like the nausea it created and this kind of sense of like helplessness. It was a very painful scene to shoot. The actor had to strip completely naked and fall apart in front of 50 extras, and it was really intense. We unfortunately had to shoot it like I think 7 or 8 times because you're doing a oneer. But that stress and that kind of grief of shooting it kind of made its way into the film. You could see like Octavia, the main actor in that scene, kind of really falling apart and not really able to cope with it. And she was stressed out because her character's supposed to be stressed out because her sister is like kind of just going ape shit, totally naked at her school. And by the time it got to the 8th take, it was just so awkward and so surreal to shoot that you could kind of feel it in all the other actors. The other funny thing about that scene is we were supposed to shoot it outside, but it was in the middle of winter in New York. And luckily we were like, let's just shoot it inside the lobby because it was so cold that I don't think anyone could handle being naked outside for more than like a minute. But yeah, it was a very different experience. That whole thing was, I don't storyboard that much. Usually we ended up storyboarding on other films if there's big visual effects sequences where people need to really be on the same page. But overall, I'd like to shot list and talk it out. You can be a lot more pretentious that way, like really, really talk up a shot, even if it's just a wide shot or a close up. Or other films I've done before for, I did a film called, oh man, my memory's going. I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore. It's the longest title of any movie. We had this huge action sequence in one room. So we spent a week photoboarding it just so we could figure out in the order in which to shoot it, because it was such a painful thing to shoot. Like blood's everywhere, guns are going everywhere. And so we got 3 PAs and we just blocked them all out throughout the whole set so that every day we could go into that scene and be like, right, here's our 20 shots, here's our 20 frames, here's where the actors need to be, here's where the light needs to be. But with Luce, we ended up, I think we just met every weekend and shot listed it slowly. Because what happens is on a feature, you have 4 or 5 weeks to prep and you think it's all the time in the world, but the last 2 or 3 weeks, everyone's like, fire drill basically. You're trying to rush to get casting done, figure out costumes and lock locations and etc. So the early part is when you really have to like put in all that creative effort, or else you're not going to get to it. You're going to be kind of improvising on the day. But yeah.
That's
I
great.
think one of the things that I found interesting about Luce, especially in terms of the night scenes and how you kind of wanted to do that more moody look, but picking like something like a white kitchen at night and kind of trying to balance that. Can you talk a little bit about the choices in that kitchen? Because I feel like a lot of the movie interior in the house takes place there.
Yeah, I ended up really not liking that house. Julius I have to really applaud Julius because he, when I read the script, I was like, all right, the school is going to be like beautiful wood-based school, definitely like the school in Finding Forrester. Like it's going to be rich and dark and moody and window lit. And Julius was like, I want it to be an incredibly modern school that's like sharp edged and like flat and real. And I was like, oh, it's so ugly. But I was like, it feels much more relevant if the school actually feels honest to what modern public schools are in these suburban areas. And same thing with the house. Julius picked this house because he was like, that's the house in my head. And as we were trying to shoot it, I was like, oh, this is really hard to light. There's white walls everywhere. So we spent most of our time trying to keep light off of the walls. So like in the kitchen where there's a lot of conversations, we built, I think, a rig with like 6 or 8 China balls just surrounding it so we could kind of shoot any direction we wanted. And then we had to skirt it off the ceiling very kind of painfully. Basically anything that's outside the frame had black dropping around it, kind of dripping around it. So the actors would pop and the walls would hopefully stay back a bit. I don't think we did too much in the gray to actually knock it down. We were able to make it. And of course, if you notice, a lot of times the actors are leaning over the table, leaning over the island in the middle, trying to kind of collect the light. And there's a little eye light dancing around, trying to get into everyone's eyes. But yeah, trying to embrace a white house and not go moody. Or like Luce's room was really hard to shoot. It's a very tiny room with all white walls. But again, it was kind of leaning into Julius's design of what the character Luce was supposed to be, which is supposed to be like no secrets, very open, very nice, very honest, like very like nothing's hidden, but slowly you're like, obviously something's hidden, something's going on. But the photography wasn't supposed to reflect that. It wasn't supposed to be super moody. And so kind of embracing the white walls and going for like flatter, broader keys was a big part of it. It's pretty different from most of my other photography, to be honest. It was like a fun challenge to kind of really embrace the director's idea and just go with it and not try to make an image that I think is really cool or beautiful and focus on something that's much more story driven and has a real intention behind it, and not be like, oh, this will look good on my reel. It's more of like, no, people are going to watch this movie and feel a little awkward as things start to like really dissolve into like a really murky, creepy, like what is happening, who is right vibe.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you too about the scene where he like goes running at night and he comes to the school and the window's still open. I love that scene. I don't know if you wanted to talk about lighting that school at night for that exterior.
Oh yeah. It was a huge pain in the ass. We actually, the whole running sequence was the only time Julius hates digital. He always wants to shoot film. I think he's only shot film. So the whole run up to that was our actor running at night. And so we got high speed anamorphic lenses from Panavision open to a 1.3. And we just shot him running in a real street at night with there's barely exposure on him. I think we cranked it in the grade like beyond belief and had to denoise it. Mm-hmm. Then when he gets to the school, I think there were 2 or 3 condors lighting it with maxi brutes, these big, powerful tungsten based lights through some thick gel. And I thought I had enough light, but you get there on the day and you throw some gel in front of those things and it's just barely there. And so some of the shots work fine. You can see everything, it makes sense. But there's like this really fun tracking shot we shot in the school of Luce walking towards it. And I like it, but even to this day, I'm like, that's too dark. Like sound design's helpful and you can tell someone's there, but I wanted the backlight to probably be about a stop or 2 more, but that's all we had. Yeah. And that was like our biggest setup in the whole movie was, getting a couple condors and running all that cable.
Yeah.
To shoot it. But that sequence is my favorite. I think the film is actually bookmarked by that shot of the school. And that's what drew me into the script, was just this kind of boring shot of a series of windows of a school at night opens the film. And then, which is actually Octavia's room. And then in the middle of the movie, you see Luce end up there. And then the film ends and you see the window with boards over it. Mm-hmm. Actually, no, in the middle of the film is when the fireworks go off. It's that same shot you've seen before. You don't know why you're looking at it again. Then all of a sudden, pop, fireworks are going off. And then the end of it, you see the same shot and you can kind of hear the American flag whipping in the wind a little bit. And I initially pitched them to end the movie there. I was like, that's a great ending. It's people are going to think about it. And then we ended up shooting the scene where Luce is running at the end of the movie we picked up in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. Like 4 months later, it was just one shot. We just came to LA and we're like, all right, we're going to shoot one shot and we're going to get this boy running. Because it was actually supposed to end either with that or the speech he gave at the end of the movie was much longer and much more like pointed at everyone. Like he's kind of bragging that he got away with something. And then as they were editing it, they kind of realized like this isn't the goal of the film and feels kind of unnecessary. So they wanted to leave it in like a weird middle ground of like, does Luce know what he's doing? Is he guilty? Like what's happening? And so they opted to just have him running at the end and kind of living in his mind for a bit. It's cool that you guys saw it.
Was the whole film 52:19?
Yep, the whole film is 52:19. I don't think we pushed anything. There was a big debate about, is it better to push film a stop or 2, or is it better to just pull it out chemically, or not chemically, but in the grade? Because you're pushing it, you're going to get more of a range, but you're dramatically increasing your contrast. Mm-hmm. So it's debate, is the information already there and you can just pull it out digitally? I think that's what they ended up doing on Mary, Marcy, Magdalene. I'm so terrible at the name of that movie. But I remember they opted to do it in the grade as opposed to do it photochemically. And I kind of leaned on that. It was also nice just to have a base. I think I maybe overexposed it. I think I rated it at 400 for the whole film. just to give ourselves a little more latitude and to go a little bit brighter than what we were thinking of. We also lost, the other beauty of film is there's like a big showdown in the school between the principal, Harriet, Luce, and his parents. It's a 10-page scene. And we shot 10 pages in one day, and the actors, you could see, were like stressed and like a little nervous because it's a lot of dialogue and it's fast dialogue.
Yeah.
And we were shooting it and looking at these terrible SD monitors. And they looked a little funky, and I was like, it's fine. And then Julius walked up and he's like, I think that's out of focus. And I was like, no, it's sharp. It's fine. It's been like that all day. And we go over and the operator says it's fine. We put our eye to it and we rack focus, and it's just the lens has fallen apart, but you can't tell. And so we had to reshoot that whole 10-page day. At the end of the shoot, the actors were like, well, are you serious? Not all the shots were fucked, but it was the close-up. It was like the 100 mil.
Yeah.
Which was I want to say it was a G series. And we ended up shooting the reshoots of a T series, and you can actually tell when you watch the grade, the T series is far more contrastier and sharper. It looks gorgeous. That's what I kind of forgot about with film, is that with film you can really use some mean lenses, just the sharpest, most contrasty lenses you want, and it's going to look gorgeous because you're not trying to hide the fact that it's digital.
Yeah.
What was your,
oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Dan.
Did you, last question about the film, did you correct with filtration, or did you just do it all in the grade?
I don't think we used one filter in the film. I think from like a long time ago, I remember Savides always opted out of using in-camera filtration and doing it later. So like all the dailies, are super blue.
Yeah.
The dailies aren't super blue. They came in very blue, but then the dailies colorist would correct them. I always liked it that way. I mean, there's a theory that, film stock is designed that way in a reason, and kind of really get the real texture coming out of it. But I used to use like a low-level daylight filter back in college and in like earlier 2000s for film work, but now I just kind of like to keep it minimal and also not have to think about adjusting my exposure for extra filtration besides a polarizer occasionally.
Yeah.
So it's a more manageable way to do it. And I also think 500T, I don't see the benefit of shooting anything else. 500T is already so clean, and I already love grain. Also, the film is a weird hybrid of an anamorphic. It's 3-perf anamorphic, which isn't normally shot. In fact, I don't know any other movie that's shot that way. We didn't have the budget for 4-perf, which uses, an additional perf of film. And so we asked Panavision to make us a 3-perf anamorphic frame guide. And we shot that, which is kind of a crime because you're throwing away a lot of the negative. You're taking a 16:9 image and only using the center part of it, or the square part of it, as your negative. So it's better than anamorphic 16 mil, but it's not nearly as clean or pristine as 4-perf. But I liked it because it gave it some grit. But the problem is that all of your lenses now are longer. So like your widest lens, like your 25, is now a 35. And so we ended up having to, I think, swapping our lenses halfway through it to primo anamorphics, because it was open to it too, because all of the photography had too much depth when we were first going for it, because we had to use such wide lenses, which was a fun change of pace because the primos are probably twice the weight of G series. By the end of it, we had a real weird mishmash of lenses. We had G series and E series and primos and zooms, and like the E series were the only lenses that could really work on the steady cam because the G series were still too heavy. And luckily Panavision has like an insane amount of anamorphic lenses. I didn't even know they had the high-speed lenses until we asked them to solve our problem, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we have high-speed anamorphics." And I was like, "What? You didn't tell us this from the beginning?" But yeah, it was like I feel like when you shoot Panavision, you always end up getting an interesting collection of glass. You always start out with like one thing, and by the end of it, you have 4 other pieces of glass, and you have this problem-solving tool. And that's the nice thing about them, is that they kind of want to really show off like what they're known for, which is their range of glass and the variety of it. Not sure if you have Panavision in Chicago. You guys have Panavision out there, right?
Yeah, we have Panavision in Chicago.
Speaking of glass, what was your testing process and pre-production like for Luce?
Well, it was funny. When I got the script, I feel like one when you read a script is you have to be able to read it in one sitting. You can't read half, then go about your day and pick it up that night, or something. You have to sit down and read the whole thing through. And Luce, I read like that. I think I was in my backyard, and then I called the director. I was like, "All right, so we got a little bit of money. You got some actors. Like, what are you thinking? Red? You thinking Alexa?" Like, I already knew what I wanted to do, and first thing Julia said was, "This can only be film." I was like, okay, but like, once all the locations come in and once we start like losing days, and he was like, doesn't matter, it has to be film. And I'm like hearing myself trying to talk ourselves out of film. I don't know why. And then he was like, it's film or it's nothing. And I was like, all right, we're doing film. And then so for the lens comparison, I think I was in LA and I started shooting tests out here. I had production send me one of each stock, like 50D, 100T, 200T, 500T. And then I shot a music video with a friend on each stock to figure out how it would perform. And it's really fun to go back and watch that video and see like every single different stock kind of click in and click out and see what the real differences were and look at the negative. And the only real way for me to test a stock is, as much as I love having someone sit next to a color chip card and with some different lights, and then you awkwardly forget that, oh, how am I going to make the light consistent with only these shitty par cans? You have to kind of go out in the field and use it. And so that was like was nice to go out and play with it and see how it all responded. And even then, I think we ended up shooting spherical for that. So we got to really see the grain structure of it. And even then, like 500T is gorgeous spherically. And so I knew when we opted for anamorphic. I think thought anamorphic too. I wanted to do spherical on Luce. A, because I needed the light. I needed those 2 extra stops to pull that movie off on a budget. And B, I knew we were going to be in tiny spaces and I didn't like the warping. And, Julius was like, I like the warping and you're just going to have to figure out how to light around it. And so I'm not sure how we figured it out. We ended up getting like a really old beat up 18K, luckily. And that was on in every single day interior, which is funny because I go from movies where I usually just block out the sun and let the ambience do the work. And then I have consistent light throughout the whole time. But with Luce, you can't do that anymore. So the whole movie's lit. Like there's very little naturalism. A lot of it is us pushing light through window and trying to make it not feel lit. And we achieved that half the time. The other half the time, it's like, oh, that key's a little punchy. But it kind of, again, worked in the vein of what Julius was going for. We called it, I think, punchy naturalism. He was going for that kind of PTA Magnolia look of like, it's real, but it's definitely lit. Like it's definitely been crafted. It's not something that's like, oh yeah, I totally believe that they're in this room and that's their key light. It's supposed to be like, no, there's a little something going on. There's a filmmaker behind it, if you will.
Yeah. I felt a lot of similarities between some of like the lighting between Luce and like Killing of a Sacred Deer. I don't know if you've seen the movie.
We remember, I think Killing of a Sacred Deer had either just come out or there was one still we pulled, which was like a girl sitting on her bed, and just we really enjoyed the light, the difference between tungsten and daylight in that scene. Unfortunately, we never had the balls to like really go that far. I think Luce is either warm or cold, like or neutral or cold. Like, we never really mixed lighting in it. I know on that film, I believe they practically didn't light it, which is kind of interesting. And I'm pretty sure they shot spherically, so you're much more capable of working with practicals, if that's the case. After doing Luce, I can now realize why Deakins doesn't shoot anamorphic. It's like, okay, I get it. You need the light, and you want to make things work with very little lights in the room. And some of the lighting setups felt like film school to me, in Luce, of how many lights I had on and how many lights I had in tiny corners and like electricians just barely on the edge of frame with flags. And it was almost like a throwback in a way of like really lighting something, which I think is the benefit of film. Is that you can't not work on it. You have to just kind of try to light it and make it work. Whereas with digital, you turn the camera on and you go, oh, what do we need? Should we turn these lights on? Should we turn them off? Does it look good? Does it look bad? You know, with film, you have to kind of make it look good to your mind's eye.
Mm-hmm.
Or even trying to like take some stills of a digital camera, which are helpful, but you know, the latitude of a still camera is, I think, fucking 6 stops, like 4 under, 2 over. So like trying to remotely make that like film, it's like a shot in the dark, but it's, it was good because you have to just go back up your gut, and you don't get to shoot film as much. I remember in film school, like a huge, like, I don't know, mark of like, I was like, oh, I'm not bad at this, was when I was shooting like a short film when I started turning lights off. We had just gotten like 1.2 HMIs were like a big deal, and we had rented them for the shoot, and they were great. When we turned them on for the night exteriors, and they just were too bright and too gross. And then being comfortable with like, oh, I think this is too much. I think I should turn these off and see if this is going to work. And it worked out great. And then having that kind of same fear again on Luce of knowing that, you know, you're going to be fine, you know, you're going to get an image, but actually kind of going with your gut and turning things off and going for more mood, was a fun challenge. And I kind of miss it. You're definitely much more alive when you're shooting film. It's definitely that fear, in good or bad ways. Cause you know, bad ways is we had to reshoot a whole 10-page day, and the lab also fucked up another day's worth of film that we had to go and reshoot. That's just because there's no labs left in the US. I think there's 2. I think there's one in New York and one in LA, and there's one in Atlanta. And the lab work is not good anymore. Actually, as we were shooting it, all of our rolls were getting milked out towards the end of them, and we didn't know what was going on. And it was like, we were freaking out. We changed camera bodies 3 different times. We had to check the lenses. We had to change out all the mags, and it was still happening. And someone at Kodak finally figured it out. And the lab that we were shooting in, that we were processing in, a screw came out in the ceiling where the film was being developed. And I think they were shooting The Irishman at the same time. And Scorsese's production had dibs as the first print to be processed because they wanted the nicer bath. And they wanted to make sure that their prints were taken care of. Then our prints were done in the second half of the day. And in the second half of the day, the sun was passing over the building and would find that tiny pinpoint of light and would shoot down to the lab, which is why all of our rolls at a certain point are fine, and then the light built up, and then you'd see it flare out.
Oh,
it was still usable and savable, but it was like the biggest, you know, it's film and it's organic and it's mechanic, and you're trying to figure out what is the ghost in the machine because it's not software. So like, what is causing this thing to happen? Yeah, but yeah, that was the fun process of film. I hope I get to do it again. I feel like I was really lucky to shoot a feature on 35. I don't really know how much that's happening anymore.
Yeah, I remember the first, after he like puts the bag in the locker and closes it, and it cuts to that first wide in the school. I was like, oh, shot on film. You just see that practical halation.
Yeah, I mean that's what everyone loves about film is you know, you get these great burnouts of your highlights, then you actually get a color shift around it. So we tried to shoot as many practicals as we could in shot because it just looks great. Like, especially if they blow out and they get that subtle glow around the edge. I've tried to make that in other movies in post, and it is possible, but it's incredibly time consuming and painstaking. And if you tell your producer that you're spending 2 hours adding a little halo to a backlight, they're just going to be like, you're wasting your grade, get out of here.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was great. And hopefully I get to do another one like that. I think Julius has another movie coming up, and I think he wants to shoot this on 4-1 this time. Which would be great, but yeah, it's also a hell of a challenge for focus pulling. Like the focus puller, I lucked out because shooting an indie isn't going to guarantee you a great AC because it's not, you know, the rates or whatever. And we're shooting on Long Island, so it's an hour in, hour out each day. And I lucked out and had this amazing focus puller. Like, we had no focus issues in the whole film. I mean, except for 2, but that's really great for a movie shot on film. To have no focus issues, and to also anamorphically, generally you're giving an even shallower depth of field and you're having funkier lenses. But yeah, no, I looked out on Luce. We had a good crew.
Was that a crew that you'd worked with a bunch before? Like, did you take your gaffer with you for that, or?
No, it's New York's really hard to bring anyone.
Okay.
My buddy was shooting another movie in New York at the same time, and he brought his gaffer, but they also had to hire a local gaffer as well in order for that to work.
Okay.
Which is very hard to convince a producer to hire two gaffers.
Yeah.
I had actually never worked with anyone there, and I spent a long time interviewing people, and I interviewed a lot of great technicians, and they all said they were all interested, then they all got better jobs, which is fine. I mean, taking an indie as like a proven technician is a little challenging, but I ended up kind of just getting lucky and had a great squad. Would they do it again? I don't know. I think I maybe burnt them out. Because every day with the commute, you know, if you had a 12-hour day, which becomes 13 hours of lunch, and you're driving an hour in, an hour out, you're looking at 15 hours minimum before you can get home for every day. So it was only a 5-week shoot, thank God for them, but it was a little draining. I think by the end of it, some of them were like, all right, I'm only doing movies in the city from now on.
What was your process like for interviewing a gaffer?
It's usually really awkward. Interviewing most crew is not awkward. It's just weird, you know, because you meet them and you're like, how do I know if you're basically interviewing their personality and seeing if they're interested in the movie. You can't really quiz them. You can't like show them different pictures of lights and be like, what is this like? What is this like? If you had to run this much cable, would you need all of it? You're kind of figuring out their vibe, if you like working with them, if they are remotely interested in the artistic aspect of the film, or if they're more in it to just try to create a relationship and do bigger pictures down the line, which I've seen before too. Also, you're interviewing them to see if they actually want it, or if they're going to be like a curmudgeon about it. I don't really interview them as much as I call around. I call a lot of other DPs and usually the thing I ask for is I'm like, are they fast? Are they near me? Do they have a good vibe? Like I generally, filmmaking is great, but by the last 2 weeks of any movie, people are going to be grumpy and like over it. And those are usually the most crucial weeks for some reason. And I'm just trying to figure out if they're just going to be cool and chill and just roll with the punches and just be happy to be on set. Because I think we all have a very lucky job to work on sets. I think our filmmaking in general is so much more fascinating and unique compared to any office job you could possibly get. So I feel like we're blessed to be on there, and I don't want to work with people that think that working on set is a hassle and not worth their time. So I usually just call other DPs and like, are they cool? Would you work with them again? Is the big question. Yeah. And are they familiar with LED lighting? That's the biggest challenge I've been running to as things have evolved. Is gaffers pushing back on embracing new technology, especially in New York. New York took a long time to kind of transition over. Whereas now on set, like I think every light is LED, half the lights are moving, everything's done on a dimmer board with a dimmer board artist or controller. And then I'm spoiled. Like in Los Angeles, my gaffer here, Matt Ardeen, we own a bunch of lights together, but he has a ton of lights. Everything's LED, and it all goes to a board. So we can literally, and he'll just drag his monitor over to where our monitor is, and he'll have every light on a board. So we can touch and turn things off at a moment's notice, change any color at a moment's notice. And then sometimes, like if we're doing like effects or practicals, we'll even put the director on the board, and they can like do the fire gag, or they can like shift the color or do something else, or like pop the lightning, what have you. But I think we're at a place now where like lighting is like incredibly interactive and controllable. And if you have a gaffer that's kind of scared of that and just wants to use tungsten lights and do things the old way, it's just good to figure that out in advance, because that's what makes indie filmmaking possible now, is you can do a lot with a little.
Yeah.
Like I think I've done most movies. I don't even really use big lights. I don't even, hopefully we don't even run 4-aught or 2-aught. We just run banded and keep everything off of LED units. But like the last movie, the lighting that's always expensive is the lighting you don't want to do. Like the last film I had, this huge lobby atrium, and we had to make the lighting consistent. And so we had to cover the whole thing in light tile so we could shoot no matter what the weather was outside. And that was half of our lighting package, was that light tile. it was cool, but it wasn't like the cool lighting you think of when you think of film lighting. It was just, oh no, now we just have consistency. I don't have to worry about where the sun is and how we're going to do it. I'm not having to bounce lights at last minute or run crazy flags somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, interviewing a first AC is again, it's the same thing. It's just trying to see if they are going to vibe with your personality and if they have a sense of humor. I think having a sense of humor is a big part of getting through a film.
Yeah.
But yeah. And also leaving a good impression, obviously, I always think about leaving a good impression with all the people around you. Like, I don't think I'm capable of yelling on set. And when I first started as an electrician, I remember just some real screamers. Hold on. My sister's locked out. Hold on. You good? Yeah, I think that's kind of changed now too. Everyone's a lot more polite and funnier and more chill. Whereas when I first started working out, like, not only would gaffers scream, DP scream, but gaffers would scream at crews too, or give people a hard time. And I think now people are pretty much scared of anyone that comes on the set with an attitude. Like, you're not gonna work with that person again.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I don't know. Are you down to talk?
Yeah, we can talk for another 4 hours if you guys like.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about the Beats commercial too that you did with Hiro.
Oh yeah, that one. That was a fun one. That one was a year or 2 years ago. That was Hiro just sent me this track, and it was just this footage of real athletes doing sports, and then someone had already done that effect where they stabilize everything to the actor's ear. He just sent me that as like a demo of what they wanted to do, and I was like, holy shit, that's amazing. And then as we started breaking down how to execute it, we were like, oh, this is a lot harder than we realized. And then Hiro was like, I want to shoot film, and I was like, oh, that's even harder. Because there's going to be less resolution and we're not going to be able to gauge focus as well. But I mean, the film aspect is what made it really fun, because we ended up traveling the world to shoot all these different athletes. We shot Los Angeles, Texas, Miami. Then we flew out to England as well. We were going to go to Paris, and then Paris got canceled. But luckily I was able to bring like a great crew with me. I brought my first AC. I brought my Steadicam operator, Ari Robbins. My gaffer, Matt, flew out to Texas for us. And the biggest challenge was just building each unique rig for each athlete. So we built a doggy cam with, viewers are familiar with the doggy cam. It's like that. It's basically a chest mounted rig or a vest that has lightweight rods coming off of it mounted to a plate that you can put a camera on. And we wanted the actors to get real physical and not really think about it. So we ended up putting a Blackmagic Pro on there for some of it. And it was great, but then we realized that half of the sports can't really use that device. Like rock climbing with that on wasn't possible, or running and doing a backflip, somersault, you name it, off of a trampoline wasn't possible. So we had to figure out what else would work. So we did a couple of tests at Keslow Camera. We brought a trampoline, we brought a skate ramp, we brought a couple different athletes, we brought skateboarders, and we just kind of tried to find different ways to track with them as they did their sport. We ended up finding out that it's kind of a game of tag with Steadicam, where we were just trying to keep the actor in the crosshairs and run with them as they did their thing. And what made that more interesting than doing the doggy cam rig is that in post, when they stabilized it, there's a bit more of a funk to it. It feels kind of unnatural and creepy. And with the rig, you could kind of feel the camera rigged to the person, but by stabilizing it in post with a camera that wasn't rigged, it just felt really unique and felt very surreal. Something like to be actually physically locked onto them in a shot that wasn't designed for it. So we shot pickups on the red, and we brought the Blackmagic with us. There's not a lot of the Blackmagic in the shoot. It's mainly for the boxer in London. And then you can kind of tell where the film is and where the film isn't. But the beauty of shooting on film was we had a lot of locations that were kind of boring and minimal. And you walk in, you're like, this is not great. And then by underexposing it and kind of pushing the practicals a bit in the grade, they started popping and feeling really gritty and honest in a fun way. And that's where film kind of shines. It can take like the mundane and make it special. Whereas I feel like digital, you kind of got to spice it up a bit and push a little harder with the lighting. Whereas a film, it's just sometimes nice to just back, and it feels much more like a documentary in like a great way than it does like, oh, we just set up. Like, we didn't actually do too much lighting. We ended up finding locations that had great built-in lighting, which required a lot of scouting, because a lot of the talent, when you're shooting that many talent and that many like kind of big names, you get 10 minutes with them, and you have like 6 shots you want to do in 10 minutes. And so you had to like hustle through it. Like shooting like LeBron, like he showed up, he was great, he was chill. And then we kept shooting him. And we're like, oh, we're getting great stuff. And he looked at us and he was like, and we're done. He just walked out. He was nice about it. He was fine. But he was like, I think you guys got it. Like, you got the 2 shots you're going to need for this commercial. Like, he was very familiar with how we were shooting it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was kind of like a fun ragtag. We don't get to do those commercials that often, or you get to travel the world with like 3 or 4 of your friends and kind of set up. And that's how it used to be. It used to be you could take huge teams around the world. You bring your gaffer and your key grip and all of it. It was also funny going to like London, and they do things differently there. You know, like your key grip is just in charge of camera movement and camera platforms. They have nothing to do with lighting or flags or any of that. They're just there to mount the camera and to rig the camera, which is kind of cool. This and potentially a better system than the U.S. At the same time, I find that the U.S. key grips are far more knowledgeable about how to do big rigs and get crazy shit done than, say, like a gaffer in Europe who has to deal with all the lighting and all the rigging in terms of gripping.
Oh my God.
Cool flare.
The sun is pinging me. I'm gonna close the blind.
Yeah. We ended up, I think agency actually didn't like the fact that we shot film because they had less control on set. And they had to kind of just go with us. They couldn't comment as much about the lighting or the exposure. They just had to embrace it. They had to be like, no, that you can't really gauge this monitor. And then, unfortunately, when we finished it, they denoised the whole thing. They took out all the grain in post. They were like, what are you doing? That's not why we shot film. Like, it's great to have grain, and filming grain is beautiful, but that's not why we shot film, because we wanted the colors and the sweat, and we wanted the texture of the skin to actually pop. But really just see that range of color, and especially like on darker skin tones, like film is gorgeous, that it really reaches in there. And you actually get like a range of red and purples and blues, and you can see a lot deeper into it. Whereas I feel with digital, it's very quick to just become a patina. You can kind of tell when you see the black magic stuff in there. It's not nearly as rich as the other stuff. But yeah, and we ended up actually switching to 4 perf when we went to London, because after shooting 3 perf the whole time, we realized we needed more headroom to help stabilization, because as soon as someone like goes like that, stabilization's fucked.
Yeah.
Headroom became the name of the game. Left and right, less so, but you kind of just trying to keep them centered no matter what they did, which is a fun challenge for the operator. You're not really trying to make a great frame. You're trying to just keep them dead center, like in the crosshairs the whole time. But yeah, it was a fun challenge. I spent like a month shooting that thing.
Wow.
For like a 60-second spot.
Yeah, it's a really cool spot. Nihal, do you have anything?
I think one of the things that I was curious about was how did you have any things that you had to prioritize on the day when you're working with this talent, like someone like LeBron, that you had to throw out certain ideas for just because you didn't have the time?
Yeah, it's when you do these jobs, you have probably 10 shots that you want to get, and then you get there, and then all of these teams and all these athletes usually have like I'm trying to figure out what they're calling it, but I think maybe it was Beats or Apple or someone. They have like an intermediate, like this kind of cool guy or cool person that's like going to talk to the talent, brief them, and talk to you about what you want, and figure out what makes the most sense until your time allotted. We kind of knew we had to do one 60-second spot, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't just getting the same shots with all the different actors. We wanted very unique motion. So like LeBron just shooting a jump shot became like a great option. and we had shot someone doing a dunk before, and somehow that wasn't as interesting because someone traveling horizontally through the air looks fine stabilized, but when someone jumps, the background's really kind of going bananas. So we, with him, we knew we wanted to get him and kind of just let him shoot a couple shots and play around and have our Steadicam chase him. And then there's some stretching and some movements. And then there's like a small like narrative to the spot of actors working really hard and then kind of getting tired and exhausted. And then, the music gets them pumped up again. They go back at it and they attack it. And so we knew we needed to get like a couple shots of each talent kind of failing or stressing out or having to like take a breath and then like turning it on and transitioning over. So you can kind of see that in the spot. All of it's kind of tied around the gymnast getting ready and then failing and then messing it up in the very end, doing that really crazy trick. For that, actually, when we went to Texas, we built a 360 green screen rig with spinning lights around her and a body mount to make it feel like we were actually mounted to her as she was doing that crazy aerial. And it worked okay, but then when we stabilized the profile shot of her doing the final spin of this track, we were like, oh no, that is far better. We'll do that, which is funny because that ended up being the better shot, and it was very simple to make. I think for that we had to actually shoot on red because we couldn't get 2 film cameras, so we shot the wide on a red, and then we shot the close-up on film, and that was done on. We had to actually bring an electronic cart into the gymnasium and then track with her because she's full sprinting across the stage, and then do a hard stop at the end trying to keep her in frame because she's dead sprinting, and then she just goes up and then finishes. But that ended up being the kind of the winner and not the really expensive lighting setup that we did, which never made the cut. But
navigate these kind of projects that are also travel, but then you find out that you have to source something like a red in a place that you're not even in.
Usually, I mean, if you're smart, if you have, well, not smart as much as if you have time, you kind of go through all the possible options of what you're going to have to achieve, and you try to do it 2 or 3 weeks in advance. So we flew with a lot of our camera package to most of the states. I think in the US we brought the film camera with us to Texas and to Miami, and then in London we knew that we could get a camera, I believe from maybe it was Panavision, I forget. We reached out in advance to make sure they had the same lenses and the same style of camera we were shooting to make that work. I mean, I think of features and of commercials, the more prep time, the more specific you can be, the better. A lot of it with commercials is kind of going in and preparing for more than what you're going to shoot, like knowing that you should have some lights, even though there aren't lights, and even though you're not planning on using them in case the director wants to go shoot in the hallway, or like something happens, or like, oh, them walking into the building looks great, but it's night outside. Like we need to figure out a way to actually light that sequence. It's kind of like preparing for the worst and hoping for the best in a way.
Cool.
But what's the cinematography program like at your school? Is it like an actual major, or is it a club, or is it?
So the major at DePaul is like digital cinema.
Okay.
And then within there you can choose a concentration. So like the cinematography concentration is something you could choose. You can choose production design, you can choose writing or directing, or I think there's a sound one, but I'm not sure if I think it's post sound and production sound, like kind of lumped together. I think there's one for scoring, right?
I know there's a class for it. I guess I've never.
I don't know if there's a concentration, but yeah, they have. And we're also super lucky because in Chicago we have CineSpace Chicago, which is where like most of the major union shows shoot. I think there's like what is there, 28 stages there.
Oh, wow.
And DePaul has 2, so students have access to like shooting on like a proper sound stage.
You guys have 2 stages? That's insane.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's awesome.
It's pretty great. And it's like a great way. Like I was working on union productions as like a sophomore in college because like it's like right next door to where I'm like taking classes and like where I'm shooting or like gaffing or juicing or whatever every weekend. So it's like, it just feels super accessible. It's a really good, I would say it's a really good program that gives you the opportunity to get what you want out of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's what all film programs kind of are. I bitched and moaned about Emerson's film program for not having enough gear, not giving us classes that we wanted right off the bat, or having like better teachers. We had some good teachers, but I think half the classes were taught by grad students. But I mean, the beauty of filmmaking is you get to, you know, the only way to do is to learn. The only way to learn is to do, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're able to get on set right off the bat, that's huge, especially if you're going to get on like really scary sets, like where everyone's way older than you and knows exactly what they're doing and you have no clue and you're just like picking up the pieces. I remember being terrified on my first features in Los Angeles. Like I knew enough. I knew how to run Bandit and 2-Aught and to like how to wire practicals and do all of that. But the gaffer would just say a couple things and walk out. And I'd just like around and just start doing what someone else was doing. Like, I think I know what I want, but who's going to do what? You know, I was 21 and everyone else out there was 30. I was like, okay, but
yeah,
that's rad. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Who's going to be watching this? This is just the students in the cinematography club.
Yeah, so we'll be putting it on YouTube, and we've kind of been doing a series of people. So far we've done like Andrew Wade, who did 8th grade, Adam Newport Berra, Bella Gonzalez, which is I'm blanking on his name, but she did a couple days on Fargo.
Cool.
And then a couple more people. So
that's
cool.
Rad.
Yeah, it's super fun. What are how do you do your at least attempt to do your work-life balance?
It's pretty hard now. I have 2 kids now, and so doing a movie, which generally means not shooting out of town, because very few films shoot in Los Angeles anymore, means I'm gonna have to like uproot everything and travel. And because I have 2 kids now, you can't really bring them. When I shot Luce, I actually brought my wife and our son, who was I think 1 at the time, and that worked out well. But you eventually you can't bring them along with you anymore, just because they have a life too, and they don't want to just be hanging out in an apartment in a random city by themselves forever. Eventually the kids have school, so it becomes this like dangerous game of like, you really got to pick your movies and make sure you love them, because it's not worth it to do a movie that's not good or it's not going to do well, because you're sacrificing so much personally. Mm-hmm. So I end up, what's changed now since I've had kids is that I tend to do a lot more commercials in Los Angeles. And when I first started, it was just, do the most compelling commercial that's most your style, that you're going to have fun doing. Let's go shoot some crazy sports thing, or shoot some gritty handheld, I don't know, video in Serbia. But now I tend to focus more on finding unique projects like films, and then I shoot like the cheesiest commercials just to kind of pay bills and save up money, so that when I go do a movie, I'm not gonna like lose all my life savings. Because it's a tiny like $1 million film, and they can't pay anyone, and I have to have like a mortgage and 2 kids in school, that whole thing. So it's this balance of picking the right project, and then at the same time having something to fall back on. I think that the thing that can probably translate the best is also debating if you want to do features only versus a mixture of music videos and commercials. I think I'm very lucky that I can do commercials still and be picky about my movies. I've had friends that just went the feature route, and they don't really shoot commercials anymore. They just shoot features. And it's hard when you're banking on movies to pay for your mortgage and your rent or your life in general. And you have to you can't wait on taking a movie. You sometimes they've had to take movies that aren't great just because they need to pay bills, which is really tricky, because you're kind of crafting this portfolio of projects that represent you and your photography style. And if you have to take a movie to make money, you're kind of throwing that in the wind. You're just like, all right, I guess hopefully no one sees this film. And luckily I haven't had to do that. I've only taken movies that I've really connected with. And that's the biggest challenge. I mean, luckily with music videos, you can again, shoot great ones or shoot crappy ones as you're climbing up. But having like a second source of income that isn't like what you're focusing on is a really nice luxury to have, and allows you to do better work. So I would, as much as I would say dive in the features, you could dive in the features. I'll take that back. If you're just a single person and you got like a little bit of rent to pay, go and do movies and follow that path. But if you want to buy a house and have kids and do all of that, you need to have something to fall back onto. You can't bank on movies. Plus, once you get, the guys that are really successful that do these huge movies, like, you're gone for like 6 months, and you're not, even if you're home, you're not going to see your family. Like, you're minimum 14 hours a day. And so by the time you get home, your kids are asleep, probably your partner's asleep, and you're just going to sleep and then wake up and be gone before they wake up. So it's this wonderful cycle of being at home but not being home.
Yeah.
But yeah, so diversify, right? That's the vibe. Diversify. Have a lot of options to kind of play around with. I'm not sure, are music videos, you guys still shoot many in Chicago? I shot one a long time ago for Lupe Fiasco, and it was a nightmare. That was my one taste of Chicago.
You gotta come back.
No, I know. But yeah, I mean, you guys are both shooting stuff on the side. What are you guys shooting now?
No.
I mean, obviously, I guess nothing now. I had a lot of stuff lined up for the spring and one potential really micro budget thing in July, but obviously all the timelines are pushed back. But Chicago has a decent music video industry going on. There's not a lot of money, at least from what I've seen, and people do. Like, I think a student at DePaul recently just shot like a Vic Mensa music video for almost no money, and they wanted a ton of stuff, and it was like this big label, Rock Nation. Again, nothing. But Brandon's been doing a lot of music videos too.
Yeah, I've been fortunate to get a couple of music videos that have decent, like at least enough money to like do the concept. I feel like I've been really fortunate that most of the people who have like the music video ideas like have at least a clue what things require. So I've been doing a lot of music videos. I did a couple small commercials, and shorts are pretty big here. There's a lot of people doing shorts, and indie features are definitely growing here, which is cool. We're finally getting a couple that are like getting some festival buzz and stuff. There were a lot of DePaul students that worked on this movie, and the director was actually a DePaul alum. It's called St. Francis, and the producer is like a professor at DePaul, and that like won the jury award or audience award or something at South by Southwest, and
wow.
is like doing really well. And Jennifer Reeder had a movie that was really successful that like a good friend of, he's like really big in the Chicago community, Chris Rahano shot, and that got like, I think it went to Sundance, and it did really well in festivals. And so like some Chicago movies are starting, like the indies are starting to catch a little bit of legs, and I think producers are maybe looking at Chicago as like a place to bring more work. Yeah, I don't know. It's exciting. It's cool.
No, it's awesome. I remember in Boston, it was like they had a union. It was busy-ish, and then as we were slowly like getting towards senior year, we're like, nothing here is really shooting but movies from out of town. And then you could only be a technician in Boston. There was no like room to like be a DP or even be a director in a way, because the market was somehow very small. Or if you're shooting in Boston, it's like you might as well be shooting in New York. The nice thing about Chicago is like you guys are the hub in the Midwest, and a lot of things are going to shoot there, and it's a beautiful city. I mean, Batman's probably coming back to shoot there at some point, I presume. But that's great that you actually have a community you guys can function in and have ways to meet people, because that's most people are kind of first to move to New York or Los Angeles, which is cool, but also like they're both very different cities and different vibes. And Chicago is a very unique vibe itself too. So it's cool that you can actually not move and still have a career.
Yeah, one of the biggest things that like for me personally is like the challenge of like meeting producers and directors and people to like get like sort of new and exciting projects is sometimes like one of the biggest challenges. I don't know. I always love to ask people like how they sort of went about meeting people like early in their career. Like, was it, meeting with producers more or making friends with directors or, just like, I guess, building that web early on in your career?
It's a weird mix. I remember, like, if I break it down, I remember first music video I shot in LA were these two tiny hip hop videos. I think one was like $1,000 and one was $3,000. We like stole these locations and pulled in all sorts of favors, and we like pulled it off. It was like right when the red cameras came out, and we broke a red camera on the very first night.
Ugh.
AC picked it up and like firemaned it, where you pick up the sticks and have the camera on the back and carry it, and it wasn't attached, so the camera just shattered.
Oh.
We had to call the rental house and tell them we broke a camera, but we also needed another camera at 2 a.m. and they fulfilled it. And then me and the director had to like split the cost of the insurance for it. It's good times. But that led to like a third music video that fell apart. But but we actually got a real producer on that. It was like a $5,000 music video, and we were all jazzed because it's like, well, we made something for 3. What could we do for 5? Like, imagine all the possibilities. And then they fell apart. And then because I met him through that, he had another music video going on with these directors named Skinny, and he recommended me for it. And kind of like, I think a lot of times of like being successful as a DP is getting a small budget and making it look like it's 2 or 3 times the budget. Obviously making a good video, but this is back when we were shooting pop videos. And so trying to make this, I think we're shooting at some shitty motel, but trying to make it look like electric and neon and that whole thing, which is very much possible now with Titan tubes. Kind of impressing the producer and those directors. And then I went on and shot a bunch for these directors just from that one connection.
Mm-hmm.
But it started with someone like a director I met in film school, and then I met a producer through him. I don't think there was no schmoozing or going to mixers or things like that per se. It was just kind of slowly accruing small work, and then the people you meet through it. Another producer I work with a lot is Jason Baum, and he produced a lot for me and Hiro and David Altabelli. He just produced Spike Jonze's last Beastie Boy documentary, which is great. It's huge for him. And I met him on like a really tiny music video, like way back in the day, shooting at a director's house. And it was one of our first projects together. And then just kind of keeping in touch and checking in. But if you're the DP that's gonna make something better, help the producer make the budget work and figure out solutions, that goes a long way, because whenever a producer gets another project or a director and they need someone that can fill in the shoes of another DP who's not available, they're going to call you because you made their last project work and it shouldn't have worked, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
At the same time, you also have to make things look good besides just making sure production goes smoothly.
Yeah.
Doing a lot with a little and being clever about it and really focusing on how to, I mean, a lot of DPs when you first start out have to be really considerate of schedule and time and work with the ADs, because you generally don't get a good AD for the first 4 or 5 years. You're getting some guy that happens to be an AD, but really is a producer or a photographer on the side. He's just helping out a buddy. And it's a bit of a challenge. But I think, the biggest trick I think to working is just to keep making new work. And some of my favorite pieces, again, were just me, the director, a camera, and like talent, and going to a great location. And then either you had a great idea or you had a very simple idea, or just kind of not waiting for something, just going out and making something to kind of progress, whether it's your knowledge of filmmaking or your knowledge of being a cinematographer. Hell, just go get Bolex and shoot some film. People love film. I've seen a lot of memes about how DPs just shoot film now so they can say that they've shot film in order to work with artsy directors. But even still, it's just a great way to change things up. And I think shorts are also an amazing way to hone in your skills. I think everyone's like dying to do narrative, and you can kind of do that in music videos. That's what was so nice about doing music videos, and from 2008 to 2013 was that music videos transitioned into short film. Like the performance video kind of disappeared, and everyone was doing these like day in the life pieces or these like hardcore dramas set to like EDM tracks. Like you ended up cutting your teeth narratively without any dialogue, which was like a real fun shift from music videos, which was just like, what's the coolest performance we can have this artist do? So I mean, some of my favorite videos I also shot on like a 5D back in the day, and now we have cameras that are far better than that. Like the Blackmagic Pocket camera is actually a phenomenal camera, and it costs like $1,000, and that with like a decent lens. Not that lenses are going to make it great, but like a lens that's not going to be super fucked up or too clean, just like something practical that works and has some depth of field, you can pull off wonders. I mean, Kari Fukunaga made like an amazing short film in South Africa on a 5D back when it was garbage, and it's like one of the most beautiful shorts I've seen on the internet. And that was back with like really shitty old firmware. So anything's kind of possible. I mean, I think the students at Emerson too, that the ones that I looked up to, there were like two camps. There were like the rich kids that wanted to shoot on 35 and have techno cranes, or like in a big like HMI for their night exteriors and maybe do like a stunt, and their pieces. And then the short films would be garbage because they spent so much time focusing on the visuals or trying to do something they saw in another movie, and the story was shit. And then you would have these other directors that would do an intimate drama about a couple breaking up on Christmas. Whole thing would be lit with just practicals off the Christmas tree, and I was like blown away by like how effective the film was, but also how beautiful it was, just using the simplest technology and just thinking of the story instead of the visuals. I remember seeing that was like a big like shift in my perspective of like what photography was like, oh, it's not about looking cool and trying to do like big boy stuff. It's just trying to make something successful. And then, I don't know. So you kind of, and that's the other fun part, is you get to figure out who of your friends and the people around you are actually good filmmakers and actually care about doing it the right way. Because everyone's gonna like the same movies. Everyone's gonna love PTA. Everyone's gonna, it's always gonna be the same. But people that actually can write or actually know what they want to do and do differently, those are the people to look out for. So I think the biggest thing is also just trying to find collaborators. I mean, you'll find them along the path, but also recognizing the collaborators in front of you is also tricky.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have told you that Daniel Scheinert was going to be like a phenomenal filmmaker when I first met him in college. Just kind of keeping tabs of people and seeing how they unfold and seeing them kind of open up. 'Cause some people are just going to go to school to watch movies and smoke weed, and other people are actually going to go there and kind of break the rules and fuck around a bit. Eventually, they're going to figure out that they can do something different than everyone else can, and they're going to capitalize on it. Yeah. That's just one take.
No, that's great. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I don't know if I have too much else. I mean, I feel like I have so many questions.
Something I'm curious about is, was there a certain thing that you watched in college or maybe in your early days of shooting music videos and crewing that kind of has had a big effect on how you approach photography or just storytelling in general?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I think the movie that kind of blew my mind was A Celebration. That's one of the Dogma 95 films. I think they may have remade it by now, but it's about a family coming together for like the patriarch's like 60th birthday. And then you slowly realize some bad shit's gone down, and like some people are upset, and the whole thing just gets thrown apart. Great drama. The whole thing was shot on a Sony Handycam. Like, do you remember the little, like, it's like a little square and the screen flips out. It's just like mini DV. It's like a garbage camera. And, they had a great location, and they had, everyone was appropriate. They had great actors. And again, it's on this shitty camera, and I watched it, and the film was great. And I was just kind of like, oh shit, camera really means nothing. Like, I mean, the photography still, for what that camera was, the photography is awesome. But it's like, locked off and long lens. So sometimes it's frenetic and running around and handheld, but it's really successful. And the movie really works. And that was the first time I was like, okay, so my job making a good movie is not reliant remotely on great lighting, good lenses, shooting on film, or shooting on the best camera. It was the first film that I was like, okay, it's just storytelling and a good story. Everything else is kind of background noise. And then Lars von Trier made another film called The Boss of It All. about a company downsizing, and they had to fire, I think, half the employees. And so they hire an actor to play the boss to fire everyone because the boss is a coward. And the actor takes it too far, and he becomes the boss in his head, and he ends up not understanding why he needs to fire these people, and chaos ensues. But the whole movie, Von Trier is trying to fuck it up. He's like cramming out half the face, or giving too much headroom, or like giving too much ceiling, or actively trying to like ruin the narrative with the filmmaking. And the film totally works. It's just completely successful. It's very entertaining to watch. And even if the filmmaker is trying to ruin it. In fact, halfway through the film, he stops the movie and he's talking to his reflection, what Lars von Trier is, and saying the movie's garbage and comedies are stupid and pointless. And the film picks back up and it still works. And it's the idea of like a good story kind of transcends anything, which is kind of like good and bad. I mean, it's kind of like, you don't have to be a good DP for a movie to be successful, which you'll see instances of. I forget, there's a couple films I think are shot terribly, but the film is really successful because it's just a good story of great acting and solid direction, and probably a killer score. Score can do a lot. Like on Luce, the score for Luce was like not what I was expecting, and that to me is my favorite part of the film. This droning EDM track that's not EDM, but this kind of Portishead bass track that's just kind of freaky and completely off pace of the suburban film. But, yeah, those are the films that kind of blew my mind. And then seeing like a lot of I think early Japanese cinema, like watching a lot of like Sonatine and Fireworks. Why am I blanking on his name? Just kind of getting a taste of what other countries were making and leaning away from American-made films is really fascinating. Which is, you know, you can hopefully do that in college. That's like the place for you to really deep dive into like the weirder films that came out of like Eastern Europe, or like the films that came out of like rural China, or from like, you know, Japan in the 80s, made some really fascinating stuff, and seeing how that will kind of focus your career, not your career, focus your concept of what you want to get out of storytelling. But everyone's kind of got to make the handheld movie. Everyone's going to make the locked off, like crazy frame movie. Like it's, you kind of want to go through all the paces to figure out what is appropriate for a project you really care about.
Yeah. Do you find yourself inspired by like other mediums of art a lot, or is it just, are you mainly a movie guy?
It kind of evolved. Obviously, when I first started, I referenced a lot of movies. You know, like a lot of my heroes in photography, like Gordon Willis and Savides and Conrad Hall, were doing all sorts of crazy things to film, like pushing and pulling it and underexposing it for stops and just kind of going bonkers with it. And I thought I had to do that to kind of make good images, and I ended up probably getting in more trouble doing that than I did actually helping the films I was making. Now, I mean, paintings used to be a reference. Like Francis Bacon was a big reference for a long time, because he would have all these shades of colors you weren't expecting. It'd be like practically a monochromatic painting, but there'd be like pinches of purple and green in there, and just kind of thinking of color in a different way. But now I feel like, because everyone's so versatile in media and you've seen every movie, like when I approach a project, I try not to bring in any references. I try to I think the first time you read a script's really important. So you need to be by yourself and read it and not make any notes and just have a real like visceral reaction. Like I usually, like if I tell my agents, if they send me a script, I don't want any names on it. Like obviously the director's name, but I don't want to know any talent in it. Like I don't want to know any actors in it, and I don't want to know the budget. Because if I find out like, oh, there's this great actor in it, oh, and they have like a little bit of money or a lot of money, it's going to affect the way that I read the script and how I react to it. Especially figuring out what actor's in it, because then you're imagining them in it, and somehow it makes it better. You're like, oh, well, that actor will make this line better because it's a bad line. So it's been fun to do that now, because I'll read terrible scripts and I'll find out, oh, they have a lot of money and they have great actors. I'm like, why are they in this film? And so usually I kind of, those first two reads is where I kind of pick and pull. And then the first conversations with the director is really where a lot of the ideas kind of come from, where you're just kind of like you're interviewing them. I tend to, like, when I do interviews, I try to interview the director more than they interview me, because I really want to pull out what they want out of the film and figure out why they want it that way. And then that will influence my references from then on. Because if I come in with my own ideas, they're great to have, but I find like I think you can kind of get in the way of making something unique if you just bring your ideas first. You should have them and then let the director talk and kind of pitch his initial idea of what he saw for it, and then start bringing in what you thought was applicable to that. I even know some DPs that will actually bring 2 different mood boards. They'll like have like a moody version, or they'll have like something that's completely left field, and then they'll interview, and then they'll like cleverly on their iPad switch the PDF to what's more appropriate to the movie or to what the director was saying, and be like, oh yeah, me too, that's what I was thinking of. Exactly this. But I think if you're going to try to make something unique, you need to you kind of have to come out of it like purely from you. You can't really like pull from other movies. It's nice, and it's a great way to convey. I ended up doing it for the last movie I did. It's a universe film, and there's I don't know 20 different universes in it. And this is Daniel's next movie, and we had to pull a color board for each universe because they had to make sure the audience understood right away they were in a different place and a different time. So I was pulling, I don't pull references, and all of a sudden I'm having to pull references for 20 different worlds. So of course you're pulling on movies and leaning on that and debating aspect ratios and trying to figure out like what's most like a potent for ideas. And so that's when if I'm working with like a production designer and costume designer is when I'll pull references to make sure we're all on the same page. Like just to talk about what the color red is like a huge ordeal, because like crimson red, a red, a poppy red, like a Technicolor red, like trying to figure out that, because if you can get your image to look appropriate on set and not have to lean on the grade later, it's just going to be 1,000 times better. So that's where I end up spending half my pre-pro is just getting references right. And I think DPs are also like, hobby production designers. Like they have a very clear idea of what furniture they want in the room and what the drape should look like, and it's not necessarily their space to demand it, but you can start pushing it. And if you start giving a lot of those references to a director, he'll start kind of coming around to the idea of like, oh, I really liked what the DP reference for the blinds instead of those. Like you can get some advice of production designers that way, but it's a good way to make sure that you're going to get what you want in the end, is by being really like clear and spreading out references with people. But in terms of creatively, I don't really like to look at other films unless there's like sometimes it's fun to look at something that's polar opposite for a movie. Forget like for the last film, we watched all these different movies together. We watched Groundhog's Day. We watched The Matrix. We watched, it's such a good French film. We watched Holy Rollers. It was like this real funky mix of movies, and a lot of it was stemmed around the idea and kind of the bewilderment of all these filmmakers making these crazy films in these crazy environments, and like what was successful and what wasn't. And sometimes you'd pull visual references out of it, but a lot of it was just the vibe and the execution of it, which would then inform how the visuals were supposed to be. I think the funnest part about being a DP is making something look bad. I get more excited about making things look shitty and bad than I do about making things look beautiful, because there's something really successful about being like, oh, that's gross 80s hard lit like gymnasium lighting that was really hard to recreate. Because I think you can probably make anything look nice. It's not hard to make a big soft bounce book-like key on someone, and it's hard to make something look authentic and look like it's real while at the same time lighting it. It's very easy to walk into a gym and just say those lights are the lights, but to actually go into a gym and make the lighting look worse is a challenge, and it's something I think people should strive for, is to try to find a way to enhance the cruder side of lighting as opposed to the beautiful side of it.
Yeah, I remember Rachel Morrison did like a Instagram live thing not too long ago where she was talking about working with Jennifer Aniston and like working with her, and it was like the first time Jennifer Aniston was like allowed to like not just be like frontal soft lit, and like how that experience was like so like refreshing to sort of do like this moody, like Jennifer Aniston had like never been seen like this before sort of thing. I think it's kind of similar. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've had some actors ask for certain lights or ask to turn off lights and turn lights on, or there's a couple actresses that will demand a wall of China balls to be their key, or like another actress will always, they always want to put them in profile to the window, so they're side lit, and they will ask to either shoot the wall so the window's front lighting them. Like they'll change the blocking so they know the lighting will be the most flattering for them. Guys too. I've had guys say, I can't be top lit. I'm like, why? He's like, they're like, oh, my nose looks huge. If you top light me, you have to do side lit or something else. But if you top light me, I'm not gonna stand there. I'm like, okay, that'll be a challenge. But
how do you navigate that?
you kind of adjust. I mean, you ultimately want your actors to be comfortable. You know, I'll take a hit in the lighting if I know the performance is going to be better. Like, so there's multiple times, like when you're working with older actors or actresses, that you're going to make the lighting a little softer and a little nicer on them because you want them to not be worried about how they look and how they move. You want them to just be there and deliver and do their job. And so I've definitely, like on Luce, there's a whole range of skin tones and different faces and textures. And you're trying to kind of, you want everyone to kind of, I mean, luckily on Luce, like the lighting was supposed to be complementary. It wasn't supposed to be lit like a backlit and like, you know, backlit, 2 stops over, 1 stop under, but it was supposed to feel like you could see everyone, that you're not trying to hide. And so we had to constantly kind of move light around, and, you know, one actor's soft light became another actor's bounce, which was like a fun challenge, working with white skin and dark skin. You know, one responds much better to fill, one responds much better to just sheen. So having to get creative with that, which actually meant a lot of top light. And then you would just drape the fusion all the way down until it's just out of the frame. So even though it was top lit, it would still reach around and kind of come under the eyes and make it less dramatic. But yeah, I mean, every movie is different. I mean, sometimes I love when actors look terrible. I think it's great. It's like a different side of them. But they don't like that. And there's always been stories about people seeing dailies and then coming to talk to the DP, being like, hey, I saw the dailies from yesterday. I don't want to look like that. Luckily, I've never really run into that, but I have seen actors go to a monitor and watch playback, and then they change how they're standing, or they'll tilt their head up as they're talking to you. Or they're not talking to you, but they'll tilt their head up as they're doing the scene because they don't like the way that their frown lines are working. But it's less so now. I think production moves fast enough now that people don't really have time to comment on how things are making.
Yeah. With some of those actors, do you try to, like, I guess, sort of gain their trust early on in the process, to kind of like avoid some of that and, like, you know, form a relationship with them? Or
yeah, I think so. I think I always start out potentially not overlighting, but being a little more complimentary towards how they're lit, and making sure that they, like, if you have like a starlet, like an actor or actress that's been around for a while, if you bring a bunch of bounce around, they're going to feel a little more comfortable. Like, they very much recognize what a couple 4x4s around the town are going to do, and that will fill them in. But if you back them off like 8 feet, it does nothing, but it'll just also make them feel comfortable. So you can make them feel comfortable without, like, necessarily, like, you know, destroying your lighting or destroying the contrast ratio you have. But I think as long as I mean, you have to be frank with them, and if they're worried about the lighting being harsh, you have to be able to explain why it is harsh and why it's good for their character and good for the scene. And if you're not able to talk to them about that, then you have a problem being a DP. You should do something else. You can still talk to them, be very frank, and they can still be very angry at you and tell the director about it, and then the director can talk to you. But that's part of the things that have to happen on set. So you have to be honest, and just kind of get it done, and then have those conversations. If you dance around it too much, it's just going to hurt the film, and you're going to take longer, and no one's going to be happy.
Yeah.
You feel like that is different with shooting on film versus digital, obviously, just because of monitoring.
Yeah, I mean, with shooting digital, everyone has an opinion about how things look. They can see it. They can tell you if it was in focus or not too, which is always fun. When, you know, someone else in their script is like, I think it's soft, and you're like, okay, I'm sure it's fine. But with film, when people still stare at the monitor on film, people actually, I think sometimes they're more drawn to it because they're looking at this lo-fi image. I mean, most monitors on film, even if they're HD, it's 1080, so it's still nowhere near used to the resolution we're used to looking at. But luckily, they've just started making new video taps, I think out of Germany. I'm not sure if you guys have played with those yet, but they're phenomenal for pulling focus. Like you can actually pull off a monitor now for focus. It's amazing because now you can, shoot wide open on a 200 mil and know your AC's got a shot at figuring out which eye is going to be sharp. But it's also a part of shooting film. Yeah, we ended up shooting at a deeper stop half the time because you wanted to make sure that you had room for air for the focus. I would hate to give an AC like a 1.3 on a long lens and be like, you got this, right? Like they'll have it in 5 takes, but they're not going to get it off the first take. And if it's like an emotional scene, so you usually try to do a 2.8 or a 4. Also knowing that film is just going to look a little bit better and you don't need to hide the background as much. But in terms of monitors, I think you still have the same amount of people hovering around. With HD, the problem is that you have a makeup artist having to run in more and tweak something, or there's like a imperfection there, and that's what ends up happening is you have the glam squad tending to be a bit more precise because they're seeing every single detail.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much, man. Really appreciate it, and looking forward always to seeing new work, and I always get excited to see the stuff that you're putting out.
Yeah, hopefully we get to put more stuff out sometime soon. We'll see.
Yeah. It's a tricky world right now.
Yeah, I mean everything's gonna come back, but it's just gonna be a little bit of time. I know all the streaming networks are freaking out because everyone's demanded so much content lately that there's like they need new content like now.
Yeah.
So people are gonna start when they're gonna hit the ground running basically when all this is over, which who knows when that will be.
Yeah.
But well, yeah, we'll have a good Sunday, guys.
Too. Thank you so much for your time, man.
Yeah.
All right.
Take it easy.
You too.
Cheers.